Hi, we're Roy and Karen, and here we are in historic Royal.
You and I had gone to Amelia Island, and when we were driving around there, we noticed there was this thing called the African American Heritage Trail, and American Beach was there, and the Kingsley Plantation, and we said, oh, we wish we had had more time so we could immerse ourselves in this part, this African American history part of our new home state of Florida. Well, as I started doing some homework and preparing for a trip back up there, I found out that we've got some real historical Black history right here, just right outside of the Villages. And we are in the community of Royal. And I'm going to tell you all about it. We're going to walk around and see what kind of history we can dig up for you. Well, here we are back home. And because of this Florida Black Heritage Trail and all the information that you can find out about this online, we started learning a lot more about Black history in Florida. It was a lot different than I thought it would be. There's so much we just don't know. And what better place to start our education than locally, right here in the Villages area. But I think we need to give a little context and perspective, a little back history, because if we don't, then a lot of what we learned about this local area just won't make any sense whatsoever. So just a little bit here. After the Civil War, the Reconstruction era opened many doors for Black freedmen in Florida. There's a long list of Black politicians starting around this time, as well as 4 Black colleges and universities. As political and educational opportunities increased during and after Reconstruction, so did the number of Black communities. Eatonville, which is now part of Orlando, was founded in 1887 and was Florida's first all-Black incorporated city. By 1900, many cities in Florida had a Black majority. Who knew that? I had no idea. Jacksonville, Tallahassee, Daytona, Palatka. Many of these communities had a very prominent Black middle class emerging. But then there was a dark side, and that was that the KKK also played a big part in Florida's history. And the success of Rosewood, which was a small Black town on the Gulf Coast west of Ocala, enraged the white folks, the KKK people here in Florida. And in 1923, they went and destroyed the town.
Very sad.
So that takes us to the community of Royal. It started back in the early 1800s. Before the Civil War, Royal was known as Royalville, and then Pickettsville. And we've read various reasons of why it was called Pickettsville. And
maybe someone named Royal and someone named Pickett?
Well, it could be someone named Pickett. We definitely read that. And then we also read about white picket fences. Royal was officially formed in 1865 because of General Sherman's Special Field Order number 15, which was known as 40 acres and a mule. After the Civil War, we wanted to help the freedmen find themselves new homes. They were no longer going to live in plantations, so we gave them an opportunity to homestead. By the way, I read it. There's nothing in this order that says you're going to get a mule. I have no idea where that came from. After President Lincoln's assassination, the General Sherman's order was rescinded by the new president, Andrew Johnson. New land wasn't forthcoming for them. Yeah. The other thing that started happening was that most black communities in Florida started becoming integrated over the years, little by little by little. The railroads were coming in, and that was bringing white settlers. And so these mainly black communities, or black majority communities, were turning white. But Royal didn't. Royal has remained over all these years a black community started by African Americans, and it is still, for the most part, an African American community. And I think the reason is because the railroad never reached it. The other reason is it's out in the boonies. And so it just kind of separated itself from everything else. So where is Royal? Putting up a map so you can see. Here's the villages. And to the west is Wildwood. And if you go another roughly 5 miles further west, here's Royal. And this map shows you those 40-acre parcels. You can see those 40-acre parcels very clearly. You and I went driving around. And we didn't have any idea what we were looking for. We didn't know what to expect.
General boundaries, but...
That's it.
And I used to drive through this land back and forth to go to work, so I had a sense of where it was. Mm-hmm. I didn't, at that time, know what it was, but... Yeah,
you were driving through it without any indication that it was this historical place.
Every day.
A lot of the properties and the relics of the 1800s, they're all gone. Most of what we're seeing now is from the 30s and 40s and even 50s and 60s. When you're our age, that just feels like it's just right around the corner. But, you know, if you were a 20, 30-year-old, that's old. Yeah, that's ancient history. But I'll tell you what, we saw a lot of cattle farming going on there.
Right next to the big horse farms coming out of Ocala.
But what I could sense was the pride of ownership, and the pride that it felt like there was a pride of being part of this community of Royal, and that they knew how special it was, this town of Royal. Many of the people living in Royal today are direct descendants of the original homesteaders from back in the 1880s. Our first stop was the Oak Hill Cemetery. And on Google Maps, it's known as Royal Cemetery. So I think I got confused. I thought there were 2 cemeteries, but it turns out it's one. And the earliest grave that I could document goes back to 1885. This is the Royal Masonic Lodge. It was built in 1958. And the original homesteaders family had sold the land in 1944. That's all I could find. Now, this was the May Ollie Mosley homestead. And this was the first Jim Walter home. A kit you could buy from the Sears catalog.
I've heard about the Sears Roebuck homes, catalog homes, but I didn't realize it was tied to Jim Walton and what the backstory was.
Yeah, well, we know from being in Southern California that a lot of the craftsman homes in Southern California came out of the Sears catalog. This particular house was built in 1962, but here's an ad where it says in 1946 you could buy a home from them for $895.
I think inflation has occurred since then.
Yeah, probably so. Now this is the Ebenezer AME Church. And the AME stands for African Methodist Episcopal. And the first church built on this land was built in 1875. Since then, 4 churches were built. And this one, the current one, was built in 1977. So as I said, we were driving around blind. We really didn't know what we were looking for. We figured we would take video of different historical things that we saw, and then we would come home and we would investigate them. So here's a video of this house that we saw, and we came back home and I found out that it was not historical. It was just moldy. It was just full of moss.
It's hard to tell. It's a home just covered in growth.
Yeah.
Maybe not cared for versus historic.
But then, look at this one. We struck gold with this one. This home belonged to Primus and Mary Massey. It was built in 1946, and it was built on land originally homesteaded by Hampton Anderson. He homesteaded this in 1885. And by the way, that means he's lived on that land since 1880, because in order to qualify for the homestead, you had to live on it for 5 years. He was one of the founders of Pickettsville. It's so interesting. And it's still owned by his descendants after all these years. That's amazing. Okay, and this is their tobacco barn. And there's lots of these tobacco barns. And I had to go read up on this to find out what this is all about. A tobacco barn sounds like some place you'd store your tobacco. But no, this is where you would hang the tobacco and cure it before you send it to market. The black men would harvest the tobacco, but they would hand it off to the girls, and they would tie them up onto sticks. They would tie them up so that then the guys inside the barn could then hang them up so they would cure. And it was very important how they tied them up, because if any of this stuff got loose, it would fall to the ground. And there was a little fire on the ground because they were curing it. It was smoking the tobacco. Well, the whole barn would go up in flames. And the original ones were not masonry like the ones we're looking at now. The original ones, they were all wood. The early homesteaders farmed tobacco, sugarcane, cotton, cattle, and hogs. And today, I found out there's still a little bit of sugarcane processing going on in this community. This is totally fascinating. They're not tobacco farming anymore. I think tobacco's...
Demand has dropped a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're right. But we did see a lot of cattle farming as we were driving around. As we were driving around, I caught a glimpse of one of these old sugarcane boilers. And the video is not very good. I'm zooming in and it's probably getting pixelated. So here's a better picture of this exact one that I found on the Royal website. The last part of this is that currently Royal is a National Historic Registry listed rural historic district.
There's a mouthful.
Say that 5 times fast. But they are in the process and working towards getting on the National Register of Historic Places. And they want to do this because if they become a National Historic Place, that'll stop the encroachment. And as you get more development and it encroaches, then they lose the specialness of their community. And so I hope it works out for them. It was a lot of fun to go check it out. So that was our trip to Royal. We saw some cool places, and we think Royal is a really beautiful town. It's not a ghost town, it's a living place. It's part of the Black history of Florida. If you want to see some more history of the local Florida area where we're living here by the villages, check out this video right here where we went to the Adamsville Cemetery. Right there. In the meantime,
we appreciate you stopping by.
See ya.